Looking back at your life, do you think your heart is in Africa?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
David Scott Donnellan was a career soldier with almost 3 decades of active duty in the war zones of Rhodesia, South Africa, Mozambique, and Southwest Africa. Enlisting in the Army of the Federation of Rhodesia in 1961, David was one of the original members of the resuscitated C Squadron, Rhodesian Special Air Service, where he was introduced to the concepts of irregular warfare and tactical tracking. In 1968, David was posted to the new Tracker Combat Unit commanded by Alan Savory with the mission of tracking down and annihilating communist-trained and equipped nationalist insurgents infiltrating the Rhodesian border from Zambia and Mozambique.
Thanks for joining our channel. This is Savage Actual if you haven't been here before. So we're going to change things up a little bit. So usually we do a lot of game related stuff, but obviously most of you who have followed us know Jason and myself have our history in the special operations community. And today we're with David Scott Donnellan, who is
Hi guys.
A legend.
I don't like that word.
I don't know, how do you want to put it?
I'd say legend.
I would
use
say
the word legend.
I'm just a soldier.
A soldier from the Rhodesian military. He's got an exceptional history, and so we're going to talk to him today and learn more about his history from the man himself.
And some history about Africa and specifically the time when he was there. So this is a different direction what we usually do on our channel, and I'm very excited about this interview. So David will be our first and not our last, so stick around. Hope you guys like it.
Don't you want to know what my background is first?
Absolutely.
Who I am?
Yeah, absolutely.
How I got where I am?
So pick a spot in your life that you would like to start from.
During World War II, actually I was born before Pearl Harbor, what was it?
1941?
1941. That's
41.
right. Actually, I joined the Army in 1961, so that gives me a 20-year span. I learned and I adopted a desire to learn more about the British Special Air Service. And one day I was on a railway platform in London, and there was an officer standing there in his uniform with his parachute wings and everything else, and his sand-colored beret in the SAS, and that kind of clinched it in my mind. I want to join the SAS.
So was it the snazzy uniform, or?
It was just a wool type of old British Army. Yeah, the British Army was all terrible things. I was a cadet for a period of time at school, and I hated school, but I liked being a cadet because I could play soldier. Anyway, I saw this gentleman there, and I thought, I want to join the SAS. And then I learned, I studied, I read newspaper articles, I read books and magazines about the SAS, where they worked not only in World War II, but places like Malaya and other places like that around the world. Anyway, one day I was working in a stockbroking firm in London. If you want to get bored stiff, become a stockbroker. Anyway, I decided that I wanted to get out, and then I picked up the daily newspaper and I saw an advert. It said, "Join the Rhodesian Army, Armored Cars, Infantry, SAS." I thought, there's my opportunity. Because I knew that the Rhodesian SAS had fought with the British SAS in Malaya, very successfully fighting Chinese communists who were trying to take over the whole of Southeast Asia. So I called the Rhodesian embassy in London, and within 2 weeks, I was on an aeroplane flying out to Rhodesia.
How old were you?
20.
20?
Yeah, 20. In fact, it was a very interesting trip because we broke down the plane broke down, that is, in, golly, what's that country called in the top of Africa there, where Gaddafi lived?
Libya.
Libya, that's right, sorry. Memory's going bad. So we stopped in Libya and we spent several days there. And the food was absolutely abominable. We had chicken, and they must have taken the chicken like this and dipped it in boiling water for 10 seconds and put it on the plate. Although in Sudan it was worse. But anyway,
no shawarma?
We spent time there, and we had nowhere to stay. It was, what was the name of the city we stopped? It wasn't the capital. Anyway, that doesn't matter. They put us in an old Italian World War II military camp. And there was nice rooms. They were clean, a bit dusty from the sand and the desert and so on. And there was beds, and there was mosquito nets hanging from the ceiling. Or at least we can protect ourselves from the mosquitoes. So he walked up and touched the beds, and the mosquito nets have been there for 30, 40 years. They just collapse into dust. So that was the end. And we spent several days there, and they finally got the engine fixed. And then from there we flew to Khartoum in Somalia. Is that right?
I think.
Khartoum, Somalia, okay. Anyway, it was a very unpleasant place. We wandered around for a couple of days because the plane had to be serviced and so on. And we walked past a butcher shop, for example, and there'd be pieces of meat hanging down, and you couldn't see the red. What you could see were the flies on the meat, and that was what they were feeding us. Anyway, we finally took off from there, and we flew to to Uganda, old favorite place of mine. And we stayed there for several days because once again, the engine of the airplane broke down.
What kind of plane was this?
It was, I don't know, it was an old World War II 4-engine plane. And they had to bring the spare parts from Britain down to Entebbe. You know, Entebbe, the same place where the Israelis were held hostage by Palestinian terrorists. Anyway, so I actually wandered around the airport for a while. So when I saw the film, I could see places that I had to pee once, in actual fact. I peed there around the corner of that building. Very interesting. And then, of course, eventually, from there we flew to Nairobi in Kenya, because in those days, an airplane didn't go from here to here. It would go stage a day to get there, another day to get there, another day to get there. So on the last day, we stopped in Nairobi, where we stayed in a beautiful hotel. Once again, the engine had given problems. And the United Nations troops who were going to the Congo were stationed there, and a lot of them were passing through. So it's interesting to see the reaction of Malayan troops, for example. When we went into a restaurant to get something to eat, there were some Malayan troops, and we went in, they all ran away. Now, I'm not calling them cowards, but the world press had said that we had been responsible for activity in the Congo, which was absolutely untrue. We patrolled the border of the Belgian Congo, yes, but we certainly weren't involved in any type of combat with anybody. But they had been told that we were bad guys, and they ran away. Finally, we actually got the engine going. We did a little bit of walking around to the wildlife areas and got some fantastic pictures of wildlife and so on. And we finally took off and we landed in Salisbury, which was the capital of Rhodesia at that time. Now, of course, it's Harare, which is the name of an African chief that lived where the city of Salisbury now is. We were boarded up in a pretty nice barracks and issued with uniforms and everything else. Then we were put in a truck and driven down to a town of Bulawayo, which is about 300 miles west of Salisbury, the second biggest town in Rhodesia, where we went into training. We did the typical British training, marching up and down the square. We had steel-toed boots, very uncomfortable, that we had to spit and polish. Every day we had 36 pieces of brass in our uniform, old British World Wars, God knows how many years ago it was. Had to polish the brass, even had to polish the boot
eyelets
between the sole and the heel, polish it nice and shiny.
Jeez.
And then the sergeant major would come round. In fact, then in the Rhodesian army, because it was a new army, separate from World War II, which had all been disbanded at that particular stage, we were trained by British and senior NCOs, and we had a Sergeant Major Matom, had this favourite saying, "Your boots is filthy." Sorry, you didn't polish your brass, did you? And all that sort of stuff. He was a great guy. I liked him very much. He was very good to us. And finally, we were called, even the young trainees for the Rhodesian Army Infantry at that stage were called to go to the border of the Belgian Congo and northern Rhodesia. Northern Rhodesia then was part of a conglomerate of 3 countries, northern Rhodesia, southern Rhodesia, and Nyasaland. It was part of a federation run by the local politicians from all of the 3 countries. Had to go up to the border of the Belgian Congo because of people coming across the border because of the war that was taking place inside the Congo at that time. President Moise Tshombe, who was then the president of Katanga, had broken free of the Belgian Congo itself to declare itself independent. And the Congolese army was sent down, not a very well-trained army, and we actually patrolled the border. Anyway, we spent our time on the border of the Congo, very much Africa. And we used to sneak across to a shop that sold beer and buy a few beers and everything like that. One of the funniest things we saw was we actually based up right along the border. Now, you've obviously heard of ants, fire ants.
Yeah.
Well, Africa has ants about 1 inch long. And without knowing it, we actually camped up. We put our Land Rovers out in a square to protect ourselves if necessary. And one day I'd walked off somewhere. I was only a private then. Walked off down the road for a pee or poop or something. And I came back and I saw my rest of my troop dancing. So I said, well, what the hell's going on? Well, the ants had come up from the ground and crawled up their trouser legs. And they were trying to tear their clothes off. And let me tell you that when you're bitten by one of those, it's by getting bitten like 100 fire ants at the same time.
I've heard it was terrible.
And actually, I took some photographs. Unfortunately, I lost them over a period of time. Otherwise, you could actually see 14, 15 guys just leaping and trying to tear their clothes off. But I kept myself, went back so I wouldn't get infected myself by the ants. It was a very happy moment. Anyway, we then went back to Bulawayo, where we continued our training. And then I was thinking, well, where's the SAS? I came here to join the SAS. So one day, we all hauled up together, about 200 recruits, and we said, look, the recruiters are going to come down to look for applicants to join the SAS, the Rhodesian SAS Sea Squadron, which was part of the British Order of Battle. In fact, if you look at some of the old books and magazines about the British SAS, you'll see A Company, B Company, C Company, Rhodesia SAS, and so on. So we were part of the British Order of Battle there. Anyhow, I put my name forward, and then, as luck would have it, my company was called away on another mission. We hadn't even finished our training yet. In fact, through my entire military career, I never did a basic training in the military because we've always been called off on something. What happened this time? There was an outbreak of foot and mouth disease. I think you call it foot and something else. Different.
They still use that term today. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, it had broken out, and we were to actually form a cordon to stop people moving cattle from one area to another to spread the foot and mouth disease, and that was a lot of fun. We camped out there, and we didn't have a cook, so I volunteered to be the cook. Had a sergeant who was from Ireland, actually, a British Army sergeant who jumped at Arnhem. Paddy Donegan was his name, super guy, very strict, very thorough, but very friendly. He would help you out with any problem you had. Anyway, I was the cook. I lasted 4 days before they fired me. I don't know why, but then they got somebody else in who could really cook. But we also found an old mine shaft. In the mine shaft were detonators for mining. So we go and get a pocket full of those, which we were so stupid, we didn't realize they could have detonated in your pocket. But in the middle of the night, we used to crawl up to where the old fireplace where the cook was, throw the detonator in the fire. It would take about 2 or 3 seconds to bang. Of course, everybody woke up thinking we're being attacked. Well, obviously they realized it wasn't because there was only one bang, and then anyhow. So the Sergeant Major called us all together and said, who's got the detonators? So I'm thinking to myself, do I tell him yes or do I tell him no? But if he searches me, you're going to find them. I've got some, Sergeant Major. Okay. He didn't give us any discipline. He said, listen, that was very stupid of you, so don't ever think of doing that again. You probably could have damaged yourself quite badly. Anyway, finished the actual foot and mouth disease barriers and went back to Bulawayo, where we had a camp. Brady Barracks, it was called, named after a Rhodesian soldier who was quite well known in World War II. And they were gathering the people together to go off to Salisbury to do selection course for the Rhodesian Special Air Service. There must have been 4 or 5 trucks, was packed with people. It's a 300-kilometer journey from Bulawayo up to Salisbury, where the selection was taking place. So we pitch up into a new barracks. Well, not new to us. It was a World War II barracks, which had been taken over. I might add at this juncture that Rhodesia was part of the Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland. I mentioned before, Nyasaland was then called Nyasaland. Now it's called Malawi. Northern Rhodesia is now called Zambia, and of course Rhodesia. Then it was Southern Rhodesia. It became Rhodesia, and then it became Zimbabwe at the end of 1979. That's a whole lot of news stories there. But selection course was very interesting. 3 Rhodesian officers, a captain and several sergeant majors. One was an Irishman called Bob Bouch, who was from the British Army. And I think the other one as well was also ex-British Army. They ran the selection. And we started with 175. And we went back to Bulawayo to a range of hills called the Matopos Hills. Interesting enough, in the late 1800s, 1860, 1870, 1880, Rhodesia was formed by Rhodesia Cecil John Rhodes, the big mining guy in South Africa. We did the selection course on exactly the same terrain as they did to fight the Matabele. And the Matopos Hills are fairly well known, and he was so well respected by the Africans as well as the Europeans that when his coffin was put in the grave, which was blasted into granite rock, all the Matabele, who were an offshoot of the Zulu nation, they moved up from South Africa, chased up there by Shaka Zulu because they'd done something wrong, and they settled themselves in the Matopos Hills, which is pretty close to the Botswana border. When they lowered the coffin into the grave, the Africans all stood up and raised their shield and spear and shouted Bayete. Now Bayete is the shout of the highest respect and honor that the Matabele, offshoots of the Zulu, can give anybody.